Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the collective. I apologize for the delay in the usual timing, but we're good to go. We're here. We're ready. We're gonna talk to y'all. We're going to talk to each other. We're going to have a great time. Before I get anywhere, though, because I forgot to do this last couple times, I just want to remind everybody, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you get an email every time we go live, which is every day. So before we get into any of the topics that I have selected for today, see, I'm forgetting stuff already. I got the ticker down, everything. Does anybody have any thoughts? Anything on the top of their head? Any questions or comments or anything burning in the top of your brain?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I do. I
Yeah,
should have talked about it in my
hit it.
IG chat earlier this morning or just a little while ago.
Let's hit it.
And I'm actually kicking my own arse a little bit for not talking about it. I had an intention of mentioning it in my live chat, but then the comments just started screaming through and I was hitting up all kinds of
Well,
questions and
I'm
answers.
already disappointed. So let's get
Dude, yeah, I'm disappointed.
let's hear it. What do you got?
You should be disappointed in me. So just before I hopped into my live IG chat, I quickly ripped through my IG and I saw that Bushwookie had put up a post this morning. And I thought it was a great post for a whole pile of reasons. And it's morning. And it wasn't just a matter of what it represented. It represented like a ton of things depending on how you wanted to read it. All four of us could have interpreted that message in a little bit of a unique way, and it would have all been super relevant and all kind of like impactful in a way. And I meant to talk about it this morning,
Do you want me to
but
pull it up?
yeah,
I
could
can pull
you?
it up.
That'd be
Yeah,
fantastic.
no
You know what
worries.
would have been even more amazing? I was
If I'd
hoping
had it.
that Bushwookie would have joined me on the live,
Mm,
or just popped up in as a commenter, and I could have just engaged with him.
that
Would
would
have
be
been
cool.
even better if he could have been here, Chance Bros. Why didn't you read my mind earlier
My
this morning, knowing
my
that
mind
I
reading
would have
skills
liked
are
to
not
talk
the
to
greatest.
Bushwookie?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I will do better next time. I will make
Dude,
sure
you're letting down the team.
to letting down the team. Okay, so I'll bring it up.
All
I
right.
will I'm gonna share my screen here in a second. And then I will read it and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, sorry. Of course, have I already derailed us? I don't even know what the
It's all
topics are
good.
today, but
It's all good. We got lots of topics. All
okay,
right,
good.
so it's kind of hard to see, so I'm just gonna read it for everybody. It says, my motivation for running has definitely slipped, and I use the cold weather as my excuse. But today, no excuses. Your ass is running whether you want to or not, is what I said to myself this morning. Since my 9 mil haircut, my sense of smell and taste hasn't been the same, but over the years, some of it has come back. During my run, I came across an old smell you would think most people would wish they would never have to smell it ever again in their life. I was I was excited and I started to run harder. The smell of a dirty swamp, hints of rot, wet, and cold reminded me of sniper selection. We would do these things called gilly washes, where we would crawl or swim through these freezing and disgusting swamps repeatedly for days. That smell reminded me of the good times of suffering with hard men. When I exercise, I like to tap into that warrior spirit. It feels good. Wishing you all a great weekend on behalf of myself and others. Keep your eyes on the prize, even if you're not exactly sure what your prize is. Keep striving for success. Love y'all. Wardo.
Come on. How
That's
super
wicked.
legit is that?
That's pretty wicked.
I mean, I
Any
read it. I read it and I was like, right away, I was smelling that smell. Right
mm,
away, I was wishing that the two of us would have been running together. Right away, I
mm,
was feeling the camaraderie, the esprit de corps, the bond, the brotherhood, the whole thing, just from one smell. I totally get it. And I just wish I could have had that combo with him this morning. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. And you know what? I will do better next time. I'll make sure that he's
Dude,
on the panel
how
ahead of
embarrassing.
time just to to read your mind before I even get to it. But I think that's a great point in the fact that your your brain is connected to your olfactory sense a lot in a lot it's a faster, I guess maybe the word I'm looking for, proximity. There we go. It's a higher proximity to your brain than a lot of the other senses.
Other
And
than your eyes, which
other
are
than your eyes,
actually two
part of your
brains
brain.
in
Yes,
themselves. Yeah.
exactly. Um, but your nose will pick up on a lot of sense, and it will trigger memories. One of the easiest ways to trigger memory is through scent, and it is it's kind of fascinating. I really love it, and the fact that you can relate that smell to someone else that you weren't on the course with, you weren't in that area with him.
Ends. But I don't. It's that shared experience, and that's kind of what most of our panels over here on the collective. Like I'm looking at Jon and Glenn, of course, they've all served enough in their own way that they understand the smell of gunpowder, cordite, avgas, rotting wood, whatever. We all have those common experiences that can not trigger a memory, but can start creating an emotion. As I was reading the post this morning from Bushwookie, I thought, and to your point, Chance, all of our senses are really powerful. And it's for us to decide what to do with them. So, in that moment, as an example, Bushwookie could have been running along and smelling that smell. And by not intentionally being present in the moment, he wouldn't have had that, we'll call it, positive outcome, because he could have been running past that swamp and smelling it and not thinking about it. But our senses do what senses do. They gather data in the bandwidth all around us. He could have been bringing on that data, not thinking about it, not processing it, but still smelling that smell and started having a negative connotation, or his run could have started degrading because he wasn't considering the smell, because he wasn't assigning it to a more positive connection rather than a negative connection. And so his run could have sucked and he may not have known why. But because he was intentionally thinking about that and connecting it to a positive moment with his brothers in arms, then he changed that smell and that run and that morning into a really positive thing. And so our senses are constantly picking up the data all around us, from our family, from our friends, from our dog, from the guy across the street, out in nature, whatever. We're always gathering data. And if you're not in the moment intentionally processing the data stream, then you're not in control of your body. Your body is reacting and you don't even know why. So I love that not only did he recognize the pattern, but he processed it into a positive outcome. And that's the branching point that I wanted to talk to him about. Was in that moment, whether you realized it or not, you were depending or deciding on a data stream to influence your day, either positively or negatively, and you chose positive, which is, of course, I'm a big fan of.
That's a great point. And I'll go into this in a second. I just want to see if Jon or Glenn, you got any thoughts on the post and on the concept?
Yeah, I have something to kind of add on to what both you guys were saying. It's when Chance, we started talking about the olfactory sense. Since I've been working nights for the last month, it's actually been, I don't have the right words to describe it. Incredible, amazing, kick ass, whatever you want to call it. How much the olfactory sense kicks up at night. And how recently, in a weird way, I'm almost using that. I'm kind of understanding where I'm getting that smell from, and I'm almost using it as like not even a secondary, but like a tertiary mapping or orientation spot for me where I am, where I'm working at the time, on top of sounds, on top of vision, because at nighttime, I don't care who you are, the vision's not going to be that great, but your hearing, if it's focused enough, and your smell, if it's actually, you know what, focused enough is not the right word. If you're aware enough and present enough, all those kind of kick in and give you almost a 3D sense of where you are, where everything is. Yeah, so that's
a great point. To be able to rely and switch between your senses takes a lot of presence, takes a lot of focus. I like how you said that. Jon, any thoughts?
Sorry, thanks for unmuting me. I'm sorry if there's a beep at the back. My camera for my kid is running. So there's the mindset that comes with it. There's the outcome of that old memories as well. We have the choice of us seeing the glass being half full or half empty constantly. And within this, I mean, from the military, that is first responder or whatever the job we do, we went through hardship. What was the outcome of the hardship is the question, right? So the outcome of that course for him was obviously positive because the outcome in his memory that it reflected, that brought it to in that moment to keep him pushing towards that run, was a positive one, right? We all have those stories that are crap. But how was the outcome of it at the end as a group? Was it good? Well, if it's good, I guarantee you that the outcome of it, that you're going to have as a memory is a positive aspect, right? Embrace the suck is kind of the same thing, right? Like it's not great, it's not great, it's not great, but we did it as a team, as a group, as a squadron, whatever we're going to call it, and that's where that smell comes as well with, right? We can all say like the smell of a dead person, you smell it once and you remember for the rest of your life. But what was related to it around it, makes the story of it, right? It's not necessarily how the body was, but it's how you found it, how it come out, how you, so on and so forth. So in this case, if the course was a success for him, well, that smell is not necessarily negative. The glass is therefore half full versus half empty, right? So yeah, it's perspective. It goes down to perspective and how you want to turn it. And I guess what Shaun said, to round it out, it's being in the present moment as well. That is negative or positive in the past. If you're staying the positive, that means that's completed. The past is completed. So there's no return.
It's a good point. In the one of the things that I was going to go at or talk about earlier was the fact that it's not even about whether it was positive or negative in the past. It is what you want to see in it right now. So as an example,
agreed.
As an example, I had a flashback 5-6 months ago. And one of the issues that I have specifically olfactory based is the mixture of diesel. And it is a very distinct smell. And it used to, in the past, what had happened was it would, set my, I would get all sorts of agitated and I would start looking around and I'd get hypervigilant. It would send me into this spiral. And over time, what I built with my psychologist and working through it was the fact that I was just reacting to the smell. I was just allowing my body to just and freak out. Overreacting for sure. Versus now what I do anytime that if I experience a flashback or a smell or something that triggers all that stuff, I then have to be, I actively be present and say, okay, well, where am I? What is the smell coming from? Where is it? And I turn the entire situation to my benefit by being present in that moment. And therefore, I'm not overreacting. I'm actually reacting correctly by grounding myself into the now versus back then, if that makes sense. Any other thoughts on this, or do you guys want to carry on?
Yeah, I do have a question for the three of you. What's the temperature in your room right now? Can you feel it? Oh, hang on a sec. What's the what can you smell in your room right now? Can you smell it? And I can go through all of the senses, and until I ask you the question, you weren't registering any of that because you'd offloaded it into an autonomous safe space of, we'll call it, quote unquote, stable. Everything's stable. There's no need to dial up your nose. There's no need to dial up your eyes. There's no need to dial up your hearing. If you're walking down a dark hallway in an office building and you've got to go do a door knock, we'll call it, you're not in the dark right now dialing things up. You're in a stable environment. And so your senses aren't moving around to try to figure out what the threat is or what the opportunity is or whatever. You're stable. You're comfortable. You're actually not taking on data right now thoughtfully, but you are taking on data. And that's the key. We always are, all the time. In our little stable rooms right now, the moment we walk out our door, the moment we walk into our living room, our data stream is always being soaked up and processed. But it's for us to realize that that's what we do all the time, and then how to use that best to do better with it. And so if you walk out your door and think that you're not a sensory being, surprise, you are. And how you process those things is for you to decide. So to Glenn's point, if you remove the vision, let's say you go on the BJJ mats and wear a backwards face mask so that you can't see out of your eyes, all of a sudden your hearing and your sensory, your touch, that all gets magnified. So as beings, if we can't hear well, we'll dial the other senses up. And so let's say you don't want to listen to the person who's yelling at you in front of you or annoying you through your auditory sensory. Once you start kind of shutting that down, your body's still going to collect data. And so now you're maybe looking at things a little differently. Maybe you're smelling things a little bit differently. Maybe you're getting a response at an autonomous level that is being shifted or shunted to the other sensory things that they're going to start complicating this moment where you don't want to listen to what you're hearing. So you got to, it's not just a case of you got to pay attention to, we'll call it quote unquote, the problem in front of you. It's the problem within you as you shift your sensory data stream around and don't recognize what's going on and don't process it.
That's a great thought. And I was thinking about this in terms of when you're really agitated or when you're hypervigilant, which is very different from being grounded or being present. And I think that I used to say this quite a bit when we first started talking, Shaun, was that I used to think that being overseas was the most mindful I'd ever been, when really I wasn't even mindful. I was just reactive.
Right. That was a good combo.
And that was that's part of it, though, is understanding where that line is drawn and saying, am I actually present? Am I truly here? Or am I just reacting to the sensory input that is happening around me?
Well, I think what you just described is not that. I think what you just said was you decided to look at that entire scenario completely differently. Mm-hmm. You've reframed it in your mind as to a completely different thing than you thought it was at one point. And maybe in the future again you'll reframe it again. But what's super important in the combo is the fact that you stayed open-minded enough to start reframing it's kind of your reality in a way. What you think is what it is. Mm-hmm. Reframing that moment into something that is more not palatable, but more understandable, perhaps, so that you can move through it a little bit easier. No? What do you think?
Oh, I'd say that's absolutely accurate, 100%. And this actually goes into the topic that I wanted to get into today, because I think that I'll put the topic up so I can actually get into the conversation here. Mm-hmm. Shared experience. It's actually kind of interesting that you pulled up that. Exactly. That this shared experience, this creates a bond between people, right? And that, we did something hard together. We did something together. Even if it's actually rather easy, just sharing an experience with someone else will bond you even in a small amount. I think it's, I don't even know. I'm not going to just throw out random thoughts here, but the thing that I think what it does, though, is that it separates us as well, right? By the fact that, say, Shaun and I share this experience every day. We get to have this, and we could allow it to say, oh, well, yeah, we have this awesome podcast that we do every day, and it's super fun. We get to talk to all these awesome people, and allow it to elevate us or separate us from those that are around us.
Oh, you haven't yet? I did that about a week ago. Just kidding, in case someone is just listening and can't see me shaking my head saying, no, that is not true.
But I think it's important to bring up, because by separating ourselves, we do this all the time, right? Well, I'm a vet and you're a civilian, or you're a whatever, and this guy's a first responder, and da 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 da. It's the same way we do it in our minds when it comes to the experience itself. And if we allocate it as this was a bad experience, well, it's going to be a bad experience until you can be open-minded enough or see the nuance that actually connects things. And so I tell people this quite regularly when vets have a hard time sharing with their spouse or their loved ones or other people, and they say, oh, well, they just wouldn't understand. I'm like, yeah, but the average person knows what it's like to be scared. So they can actually understand what it's like to be scared. They're not going to understand what it's like to be shot at. Cool. But you can find the nuance of like, yeah, I was scared. Okay, well, that person's been scared too. Okay, well, let's find where those two things meet. And then once you are able to do that, it allows you to develop either the conversation or the relationship or whatever, because you were open-minded enough to find that nuance, to find that shared experience, even though it was a different experience between the two of you. Any thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're totally right. It's first thing first is being open to it. I had issue personally when I got out to hang out with people who did not serve. I was like, I don't connect with anyone. But the truth is that is far from trauma, that is for experience, that is for whatever the hell may be. We do connect. We do, and by maybe sharing, but accepting the difference as well of others, which sometimes can be hard to see or accept or whatever that might be. But it's you're gaining a form of wisdom from another person as well, right? Because in their scenarios, in their life experience, they got out something that you might not have, and then when you revisit your own experience from their eyes, you might gain something out of it. I mean, there's something in each person. I believe that each person in your life should bring something to you, right? You should gain from them. That is their experience, life, work, whatever the hell maybe. But they're there for a reason, right? If not, they wouldn't be there. If not, the relationship would be over. If not, it wouldn't exist. You wouldn't have any attraction towards those person. That is physical, mental, or whatever the hell. Right? I think.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'll
Glenn,
translate that in French in 5 minutes. Wait for the part 2.
I think people just have to translate it themselves. Glenn, any thoughts?
I think the shared experience, I think for me, when it was kind of brought up, there's the kind of, I won't say the basic one, though. The one that comes to mind real fast is experience something together as a team, as a pod, as something. But I also thought about a shared experience and spending time with somebody else and kind of not putting them on a pedestal, but just listening to their experience, doing something and learning from that, or taking from that. I also think about that as a shared experience as well.
That makes perfect sense. Anything to add there, Shaun?
Yeah, I agree with both fellas. And I'm just gonna, and when I say I agree with this, that we can all share experience. We can have shared experiences with other human beings. The level of the shared experience, or I'll more correctly call it the intensity of the shared experience, is determined by who's around you and what has just happened, or what are you in the middle of that moment. So, if you have 4 cooks in a kitchen and someone drops 12 eggs on the floor and they all break, that shared experience isn't a big deal. But when you're with 4 operators and something next to you blows up, that intensity of that shared experience is a big deal, unless you're used to a lot of explosions. And so it's all calibrated to who you're with and what the intensity of the moment is. And I'm not suggesting that explosions are more intense than broken eggs. Depending on who you are, the broken eggs can be more intense than an explosion. So it's all for it. The topic at hand should be considered through who it is that you're with, what the intensity of the moment is, and how it affects the group, to include yourself in isolation as the single individual. And so I think it's fair to say, easy to say, that our most impactful shared experiences usually had intensity. But our understanding of intensity is different than the cooks in the kitchen. And so that doesn't mean that their experience is a level below ours, or should be diminished in any way. It just means that we have to figure out a way to form a communication bridge between explosions and broken eggs. So you had said, Chance, that everyone faces fear. Yeah. But the reason that I think a lot of guys in the military, as veterans, as an example, are uncomfortable talking about their fear is because our fear is different than 12 broken eggs.
For sure.
And so if we start talking about broken eggs and trying to make the comparisons, and if that other person on the receiving end is like, yeah, but bro, I didn't get to make my omelet. It's hard to engage in that. But we, us veterans, anyone who has had intense shared experiences, we got to figure out how to bridge that. And I don't do it well, because sometimes I look at the person in front of me and think, literally, are you freaking kidding me right now? You didn't make an omelet. But I mean, if I got to connect with the person, I got to figure out a way to communicate with the person. And to Chance's point, making the similar comparison from fear to fear can start that conversation with anybody who's standing in front of you.
That is a great point. And I like the fact that you brought up the idea of who and where and when, why, all these things that play into the scenario. Because if you were a brand new cook, like it was your first day in the kitchen, and the chef tells you to make an omelet to see how well you can make an omelet, and you walk out and you smash a dozen eggs, that's going to be, difficult for some people. Traumatic even, right? Versus, an operator who's been out in the field for 20 plus years, and, a rocket comes in and it lands, 100 meters away. He's going to be like, whatever. It's not going to be an issue.
You know what he's going to think? Guess we're having omelets this evening.
Exactly. Omelets indeed. But I think that's part of understanding the nuance, right? That's part of developing the idea that we can all share experience without having to share those specific experiences. In a similar way that we can read a book and we can listen to someone else's story and absorb a piece of that, as Jon and Glenn were saying, is that we can absorb a piece of it, but we don't have to be there to absorb that piece. Now I got a couple of comments and questions here, but any thoughts on this before we jump on?
But what Glenn said, I think, is the key to all of this as well, is listening, having a good, attentive listening skills to be open to the other person, because that's a huge part, right? Because if you compare to that eggs versus operator aspect that you're talking about, right? If you're just having in your mind, well, I've seen rockets, like blah blah blah, those eggs going to be ridiculous. But if you attentively listen to that person, you're going to hear how bad it was that those 12 eggs broke. Mm-hmm. So you need to be open to hear it, right? So there's no comparison at first. You need to understand and hear what the person felt and went through first and foremost, to actually then make a connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad you raised that point, Jon, because I figured I'd be able to hit this in about another 10 minutes or so. Just a bit of free thinking forward in the future. What I actually wanted to talk about was the idea that I think one of the things that veterans struggle with, or someone who's faced adversity enough, like institutional adversity, we'll call it, that they can look at the person next to them and think, yeah, I get it, bro. Because you've all been there and done that. Now, where it kind of falls apart is when you're talking to those 4 cooks looking at the 12 broken eggs and try to explain the intensity of your experience, which you can't, because there's no common language. And here's where I think it falls apart for veterans to some degree. There's a moment in your history where you'll start to understand what we're talking about, where it's not about the eggs, it's not about the rockets, it's just about connecting with the person in front of you on a common theme. We'll call it fear or whatever, and having that discussion. But preceding that, before you get to that moment, as a veteran, you can maybe find yourself in the trap of, to Chance's point, Diesel put him off at one point, or still puts him off. And this is what happens. Blink, 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 Diesel. Oh no, that just goes on the pile of problems. All of my fears, all of my problems, all of the things that I can't cope with, all of the things that trigger my PTSD, all of the things that blah, 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 that big bucket called problem bucket. And the problems just get piled into the bucket. And every time, oh no, Diesel, and just keeps piling, and the bucket gets full, and then it starts overflowing, and every problem goes on the overflowing bucket, and nothing ever gets dealt with because, oh, it's another problem. Woe is me, victim mentality, et cetera, et cetera. The only way to get to the second phase, which is where you can communicate with a person on a common ground, is to empty that freaking bucket, or at the very least kick it over so at least some of the swamp water falls out of it, and you can take a look at a diesel problem and think, oh man, freaking diesel, that sucks. Well, my bucket is empty. I'll chuck it in that empty bucket and get on with my day. And by the end of the day, you can kick that bucket over again, and there's far less swamp juice all over the floor.
100%.
So that bucket, would it be that you're at peace with yourself? Because at some part,
no, you're not. You're quite the contrary. You're absolutely not at peace with yourself because of the bucket.
No, but I understand that aspect of not being at peace for this. But I mean, you have to stop thinking about yourself for 2 seconds to be open to the other person or they went through their experience, right?
Oh, so yeah.
You need
but that's
to
the problem. You can't. Because you haven't worked on the first phase, which is dealing with your own problems, in order to go to the second phase where you can communicate with a person on a common ground. It's trying to put the chicken before the egg. And the egg has to be worked on first. And in this place, it's getting rid of all of the I can't stand the smell of diesel times 4,000 other issues that you are incapable of having that common ground discussion in a positive manner that is not only beneficial for the person in front of you, but is freaking beneficial for you.
The question is, did the egg came first or the chicken? I'm just very curious here. I just want to know.
Well, fortunately, none of us are chickens, nor do we have to figure that out. But what we do have to figure out is how to get rid of that bucket.
I was just going to say that what that bucket actually is avoidance. That's the thing. That's the place you put stuff to run away from it, right? 100%. I don't want to deal with this right now. Get it in the bucket. And it takes actual mental work to either kick the bucket over and deal with the issue of having everything spilled out, or piece by piece, taking it out, looking at it like, I don't need this anymore. Take it out. I don't need this anymore. Piece by piece. So there's multiple ways you can go through that. But once you can empty the bucket and keep it empty, that's where you can start finding that nuance, where you can find that connection between other people. Because until that bucket is empty, that's always going to be on the top of your head. That's going to be the first thing that needs to be dealt with.
Well, it's holding you back from playing a fun game.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a fun game. If you enter into phase 2, presto changeo, man. It's like the best Monopoly game ever.
I couldn't agree more. Any other thoughts on this before I do some questions here and comments? Good. John, what's up?
Last time I'm going to stop.
It's all good, man.
After, because Glenn looks at me with those eyes, and so I'm going to just stop talking. But there's a time, I think, for good avoidance, and it's not an avoidance forever, right? But let's say that you're extremely elevated or trigger, or whatever that can be. Maybe I don't think it's the right time for you to actually try to dig down and figure it out exactly what's going on. You got to slow down, you got to cool down, and then you can visit it, right? So there's a time for avoidance. And if you constantly avoid, I think this is when it's toxic. But if you avoid just for a small amount of time to regulate yourself and then visit the problem or whatever you're confronted to, that's a healthy avoidance. Like, it's a small amount of time. It's not constant.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a process to it. It's much more in depth than the grazing over I gave it.
Yeah, well, this 100%. Is high level generalization, barely scratching the surface.
Yeah,
for sure.
100%.
John, you're right.
Yeah,
you are right.
Good correction, though. Absolutely, you're 100% correct on that. So you win the collective today.
Times 2. You're employee of the day.
Oh man. Employee of the day. I'm usually employee of the day, and you took it
once
from
a
me.
week anyway.
Okay. So we got some comments here. Winterstorm commented this earlier on. Anyone who's been a dad, your kids may be older, but when you pick up a small baby and get that new baby smell, it floods the memory to when they were little. 100% it does. Absolutely. Even now, when I pick up my boys and I'll start wrestling with them, I'll get a little like whiff of their hair or something. I'll be like, oh, I remember when they were like this big. Yeah.
My boys don't smell like that anymore.
Well, that could be a good thing, I guess. My boys aren't teenagers yet, so they haven't reached that like cusp over. So, and then Winterstorm goes, Shaun, just practice grounding. You tune out most senses on the daily. When you were talking about that earlier. Okay, so now we got a good question, but go ahead, Shaun. What are you gonna say?
I was just going to agree. Yeah.
So first one, since you were talking about sensory input earlier, do any of you think that you have a lasting shared experience? There needs to be a heightened emotional component. That's a good question. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I listed off like gunpowder or cordite or, avgas. Each one of those things, like take avgas as an example, or aviation gas, aviation fuel. Like the moment that I smell avgas, I feel a parachute on my back. I feel weapons strapped to me, and I feel like phase 2 is about to be someone getting their ass kicked. So I smell avgas, and then the next logical leap is I smell cordite. And then the next logical leap is I smell humans. And so, it's you can take a sensory input that can then create a cascading effect of sensory input so that one smell will deliver a entire novel's worth of experiences in your head that you may or may not engage in or may not relive. That's up to you and how you process the moment. But one smell can create an entire lifetime's worth of dialogue in your head in a microsecond, and it's for you to decide how best to process that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Glenn or John, any thoughts? Glenn, I'm gonna put you on the fire, Glenn. Glenn, you're up.
I kind of think that there doesn't need to be a heightened emotional component, but sometimes there just is, given the situation. Kind of, I've never been attacked by rockets or anything like that.
Well, you're in downtown Vancouver, so let's not rule it out.
Yeah, I was gonna say you never know.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories there, but I think there's definitely situations where it's kind of there's been kind of a holy crap moment where everyone's emotions were kind of like, whoa, that could have been a lot worse, or we were lucky, or they were lucky, and we're able to not necessarily debrief it, which we did, but we would talk about it and joke about it over Tim Hortons or whatever. And I think that's there. If it was just kind of a neutral situation, we probably wouldn't be talking about it anymore over Tim's. We'd probably just kind of slough it off. So I think Shaun alluded to it earlier that the intensity of the event is definitely a factor or a variable in that component. And I think the more intense the situation is, I think it's only natural for an emotional component to rise with it. So I believe probably there is, but it's situation depending.
Yeah, that makes sense. John, any thoughts?
I think you're right, Glenn. I was visiting different type of, not necessarily the uniform memories, but I was going with my wife gave birth twice. Right. And the scream, the 55 person around, the fact that I feel useless beside holding her hands or bringing water, but the emotion were heightened as well. Right. The experience is very vivid in my mind and so on and so forth, but it brings happiness. Right. And then as much as there's fear, because last time her liver was failing, so on and so forth, and baby was dying. I mean, as much as the fear was extremely present, it's the happiness of what will come next, because we're hoping for the best of it.
Yeah.
Or like the gunpowder that Shaun speaks, for me, it brings a smile, like right off. Okay, well, we're gonna go to the range. Well, it's training. Well, it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be hard. Or it could be as well the pepper spray. There's no fun in pepper spray, rather being tased, but like doing it at the unit and doing it at the police service aspect, where okay, now the first time I did not know what was going on. There's 3 guys jumping me. Okay, cool, that's not fun. But then in training and police officer, since it was done already, well, okay, like now I know what's going to come and what I'm doing, right? what I come down to is I was always looking at the positive down the street of it, right? Like, okay, well, my wife is almost dying, my kid too. They're gonna survive, and we're gonna have a good time with the third kid, the first kid who's back home with a friend, right? Like, there's a way of looking at it, or at least I'm trying my best since diagnosis to have that glass half full. I'm not fooling myself by knowing that there's negative and really dark things in the world, but I know that it's better for my own health to see it with the positive eyes versus the negative eye, right?
Yeah.
How long have you been thinking like that, John?
A month.
Still kind of new.
It's new, but it took a lot of time, and I think it's what changed things is self-search. Who am I? Who are we? What does it things change? Is that diagnosis going to take control of it, or am I going to control my life? What type of person am I? I talked with Shaun about that. Like I reached out to Shaun about, do you know what a Sigma is? Because I had no clue what the hell was that. And we had a chat about it. And then I'm like, I'm buying 1 book, 2 book, 3 book, 4 book, 5 books. And then what is a beta? What is an alpha? And as a man, I think it's important to know what is your place, like who are you and what do you want to become. Same as, if you have mental health injuries, well, you better learn what that mental health injuries can be. If you have mental health issues, ADHD, I don't think it's an issue, but society thinks so. What ADHD can do to your life, and what is the positive, because it's just not just negative like we were taught in the 90s or whenever. So like there's a perspective that changed everything around. And yeah, it's recent, but honestly, like it took me a while to set up that mindset to say, I take control of it. I'm not going to let anything else put me down one more time, because my mind, our mind has what, 60,000, 80,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of it is negative, right? So we have the choice. Can be, yeah, true. But we have the choice to go negative or positive, right? If you go in a battle, I'm convinced the guys, you have the choice to say, I'm going to go back home or I'm not. And that will change the battle as well. It comes with it, right? Or as a cop, I know I got in bad fight when the click in my head came, and I'm like, I'm going to my wife tonight, right? Like I'm going home, and it was the difference where the fight shifted to, you're gonna taste my fist because I'm going home, right? So I think it's perspective.
It's a great point you bring up on the fact that it's a decision. It's an actual choice on whether or not you want to spend your day thinking negatively or if you want to spend your day thinking positively. That's one of the reasons why we started the collective, was so that we could have a positive portion of the day. Like let's all sit down and have a really great conversation, and we can build on that. We can build on everything. And I think it goes in along with this question, as well as his continuing question on the next portion here I'm going to add in a second, is that I think we put a lot of physical connotation onto experience, and there doesn't have to be a physical connotation to an experience, because yes, you can be highly physical in an experience, like say a rocket attack. That's a pretty physical experience, but you can also have a really solid emotional experience that doesn't require a lot of physicality. So I went on the Warrior Adventure Canada trip, right? There was the physical side of it, and the fact that we were canoeing through the Algonquin and the lake system there. But the shared component of it was the emotional vulnerability of everybody on that trip, in that we all came to it looking for something. And I think that's part of it. So the continuing question from Winter Storm goes on, and if so, do you think that you've had a harder time forming those shared experiences since leaving your high level careers? And I think that the hard time forming those shared experiences comes from understanding that it's not about the physical portion of the experience. It's about understanding the emotional component of that experience, and then either seeking to do better, and a lot of it came down to understanding that you're in control. It's your show. How do you want to feel about it? And then go from there. Any thoughts, Shaun? Anything?
Yeah, first of all, I want to congratulate John. I'm a huge fan of what he just said, that the simple fact of, and I'm not saying he's owning it or he owned up to it or whatever. All I'm saying is John just said legit that he's on the right trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if he started that yesterday, a month ago, a year ago, a decade ago, non-factor. The simple fact is that Jon now can publicly state that he is knowingly heading in the right direction for him. That's super cool. Cool like Fonzie cool. And so that's an important point to raise, because we talked about how veterans can commonly throw all of their problems into the bucket. Oh, no, another victim problem. Oh, into the corner, into the bucket, and not dealing with it. Eventually, you got to deal with it. If you want to publicly proclaim, I just recently figured it out. I'm heading in the right direction. I'm loving life because of ... I do not care if you just came to that realization yesterday. If you learned that yesterday, that you can do it better, you now know how to do it eternally. And it's not a case of you only just learned yesterday, oh, you're the noob. Once you learn it, you're the pro. You're a seasoned veteran in understanding how to do things better, because time is basically just a construct. Once you understand that to do better, you just do better.
Mm-hmm.
The rest takes care of itself. So I'm a huge fan of Jon making that comment. And then on to harder. Do you think you've had a harder time forming those shared experiences since leaving high-level careers? No, I don't. What I did do was go from hard experiences in my previous careers to going and finding hard experiences out in this world around me. Why do you think I chose 24-hour solo mountain bike racing? Because it's freaking hard. So I replaced one hard with another semi-hard, and then I bumped into some people who were pretty hard. Then I started coaching them, and then I've got a boatload of friends who are hard. And so I replaced one hard with another form of hard. And it's not about, you know, which one was harder or not. It's just about, you got to find your level of adversity that you need, not that you want. It's not about want. It's about you need adversity. And once you go find that, you don't have to contrast it against whether you're wearing body armor or not. Hard is hard. Adversity is adversity. Suck is suck. Go find some suck, and you'll worry less about all of the minor problems in your day. That's what I would have to say.
100% agree. I know many people that would rather strap on body armor and walk towards the enemy than to sit down with their own feelings.
Right. And I also know a whole pile of people who would like to strap on the body armor while they sit on their couch.
Yes.
And not
that
only
too.
have no feelings, but do literally nothing other than play pretend, act like they're Thor in a Marvel comic. It makes them feel better without doing a freaking thing.
Yep.
And so not even standing up off the couch. But I get it, because what are they doing really? They're trying to relate to a moment in their past where they felt something. They felt whatever it was. Maybe they felt pride. Maybe they felt honor. Maybe they felt discipline. Maybe they felt focus. Maybe they felt like they're a part of something. Maybe they felt like that's who I want to be again. So they strap on a plate and they think that they're it again, but you're not at all. In fact, you're doing more damage by strapping it on and just sitting there and dreaming that you are doing something. You're play acting. And so rather than strapping on a plate, just sit down and think a little bit more deeply about what you're actually going to do later that day that is going to somehow connect you to those hard experiences in the past where it made you feel like you had self-worth, where you felt like you were in the game, where you felt like you were crushing someone and maybe crushing it alongside of other people. Doesn't mean that you got to go run up Everest. It just means that you got to get off your couch and go stare at a nearby mountain and see who you bump into along the way.
Kick off those Dorito bag slippers.
100%.
There's nothing against Doritos here. I want to make that clear. Okay, we love
I
Doritos.
don't mind Doritos, but I prefer Miss Vicky's.
Ooh, okay, you got me there. But I think it's making peace with the fact that this part of your life is done as well, right? I personally, I kept thinking about the unit because for the longest time I would say this is the best time of my life, and I'm like, I left at 30 years old. There's probably 40 years to come. How can I already judge that was the best time of my life? it's because I did not challenge myself for something even greater, better, whatever it is for myself. Right. The policing did not fulfill that bucket. So I was like, okay, well, it's over. Right. Until I realized that, yeah, I can suffer or I can overcome a lot of things, adversity and so on and so forth by myself. I don't have to be part of that unit to overcome something and make it greater for my life. So you have to have actually close that door in the past to come to the present to build the future, right? Or to be present for that next event that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, that unit gives you the potential to be awesome in the present and in the future, but it doesn't happen by itself. Every day you got to be pulling that unit trigger called executing a plan against the day to be more awesome.
Yeah.
And so by having all those skills embedded in you, they don't exist until you start using them to be more awesome. And so I look at the unit, we have a shared history in the sense of being at the Hill. I look at the Hill way back in the day. In fact, I'll be going there at the end of this month to see some old bro hemos. But I look at the Hill as one of the skill sets that I've got that make me be able to do X, Y, and Z in the future. I don't look at it as the best days of my life. I look at it as days in my life that allow me to have the best days in my life to come.
See, I discovered that it was the awaken time, right? So someone who was asleep for so long, just going with the flow, doing what he has to do, being around X amount of guys who are like Shaun-minded, right? Because let's be honest, I was just a gray man lucky enough to get into it. I believe it opened my eyes that wait, it can be more than this. Like those guys they were not just born like this. They had to work to get to that level. They had to put heart and soul to get there, because quite often, right, it's your mind that gives up, it's not your body. So to have that level of, again, keep pushing yourself forward, further down, that is a motivation on itself. You don't need to listen to those podcasts like this one. I had those X amount of guys who were minded like this, and I think it was I don't even know how to explain it. I don't have words because it was above and beyond. And then the fear of failing kind of fell outside of the life, because failure happened and it's good as long as you get up, right? The fear of pushing and being in pain is part of the deal to go forward and overcome yourself. So for me, that unit was the awaken of, wait, it can be better. I can actually overpass the just me to become someone else.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Glenn, you got any points? You've been quiet in the corner there a little bit.
No, man. I think number one, Winter Storm has some awesome, thought-provoking questions.
Spitting fire since the beginning. Dude, spitting fire.
Unbelievable, man. Dude should write a book.
Or questions for the podcast. That's what we call it.
Or be my personal advisor, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I just kind of made it super simple for my monkey brain, and just goes back to something that you guys have mentioned a bunch of times, and Jocko's mentioned it, to throw that small name out there, is the importance of finding a new mission, no matter how big, no matter how small. It's like, can I make the best omelets that I can make? Let's try that for the next 2 weeks. Cool. Can I get faster at peeling potatoes? Cool. Or
dude, I do those things all the time.
That's one of the game, right?
My entire life, every little aspect of it is a program that I challenge myself with. It's not that I'm unsatisfied with how fast I peel a potato. I'm just looking at the potato as the puzzle that I'm going to relook at in a different way every single time, trying to improvise, adapt, and overcome the potato, try to optimize efficient potato peeling, try to inefficiently peel a potato to see if I can learn something new about the potato. I mean, the potato is the analogy of my entire life. Everything I do is taken on as a challenge, not to beat, but to improve upon.
Yeah. You know what? It reminds me of, you guys ever watch a chef use a knife?
Yeah.
right? And just they're not even looking. They're doing other stuff, and they're just sitting there chopping away. No, 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 no. And they'll switch between vegetables, whatever, and they will continue working. But they will still refine that as they're working, and they will refine and get those chops to be absolutely perfect, and they will make those perfect little squares, right, without even thinking about it. But the way they got there was through sitting at a table with their friggin' hand and the knife and the vegetable going and going slow and smooth and finding those efficiencies and finding those little points and going, I can get faster. Ooh, I can make
until
julienne
the
fries.
rocket lands in the kitchen.
Then they break 12 eggs.
12
are broken.
freaking eggs, boys. Who's paying for the eggs?
And then the dozen eggs hit the ground and everyone freaks out. I think.
And then
that's
Sean's
fantastic.
like, "We have omelets tonight, boys."
Yeah.
Omelets tonight, and go sweep up the rocket carnage.
I have a question for Glenn.
Give
So
her.
I want to know: is your wall going to be blue behind you? Is it why you have stickers blue?
I use that for dry firing.
Oh, okay.
Smart. Smart. I like that.
Question.
I've been wondering about that for years. Or not years, but for the last little while. I had never even asked him. It was just this little question in the back of my head of like, I wonder what those are for.
So
But
I have 3 walls. So this is the closest one, and I have 2. The post-its get smaller but more spread out on the further walls.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of use that and put that little red dot on that bad boy.
Though I know I already knew what those are for, I did want to add in that it's kind of like, because you're relatively new into the blue game, every month that goes by, you get a new blue stripe for your white belt in policing. You know what I mean? Tiny little stripe.
We got one little comment here that I want to throw in because I think it's very important to understand. And then we'll do some last comments because we're already at an hour. So Winterstorm says, if Shaun puts this much thought and effort into potatoes, I shudder to think the research that goes into a bathroom break.
Dude, everything is a game that I need to do better. I gamify. No joke. Everything. Like, I'm not even going to describe what I do when I'm going to the bathroom because I gamify.
That's outstanding. So again, thanks, Glenn, Jon. Really appreciate you being on here. It's been an awesome conversation. I think we've really covered quite a bit of ground here. But any final thoughts? Any last pieces on shared experiences, on anything we've gone over today, Jon?
I just want to say that what you guys do is a daily motivational show. I think it's fantastic as is. I love hearing experience, but I love hearing the perspective of each person goes through. And I think it goes back to your shared experience where without being in that room of 4 person, the person who listen can actually go through the same feelings of shared experience, right? Like it's from a third perspective, if you wish, which is awesome. I really, truly enjoy it.
It's our pleasure, man. I have lots of fun doing it.
I agree.
Glenn, any final thoughts?
Yeah, man, it's great to see you guys again. I miss my boys.
I miss you, buddy.
And Jon, freaking great to meet you, man. The stuff that you're putting down, I was definitely picking up. So I'll have to connect with you offline as well.
I'll drive to Vancouver. I'll come by.
You got a free place to stay, man, and Keurig coffee.
you're killing Shaun right now.
There it is.
I had to, man.
You can see a little blood vessel in his head. It's just
right at the end.
Don't forget the power rings, right? Like your cups of power rings all over the place.
Yep.
Donuts, man.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. Oh, as Jocko would call them, what are
sugar-coated lies.
Sugar-coated lies. They are tasty though.
Oh.
Tasty lies. Let me tell you. Yeah. So we've been just about an hour. Shaun, any final points on sharing experiences?
Yeah. Great convo, and as always, I learned a lot in this discussion. I love the fact that the topic of shared experience, just by discussing the topic, should illustrate a shared experience in this moment, in the real time.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we moved our shared experience discussion on shared experience across a number of different sectors within the small construct that we created, I love that. And I'd like to build off that shared experience by saying thanks, Jon, for showing up for the first time over here on the Collective. And I had mentioned to Chance last night that I would love to, as we've talked about previously, love to get a panel of guests that have some, will show up with some questions that they're interested in, maybe a like-minded panel of folks who are trying to get fitter or folks who are trying to figure out a new way to get more precision in their trajectory, or just general questions that I get hit with on the regular in either my live IG chats or in my DMs. I'd love to be able to have not answer those questions, but have a discussion with several people in the room at that moment about their ideas and how we as a group can form out better solutions than me just kicking out, well, this is what you do with macronutrients. So I'd love for fellas like Jon and et cetera to come back and have like an open conversation and in things that veterans, et cetera, are really interested in at a fundamental level.
Couldn't agree more.
I'm in.
Good. Well, you're going to be in. I'm not letting you get out of this one. So
yes, you are in.
we will sort that out. And if you're watching right now and you want to be involved in that conversation, hit me up, shoot me a DM, either on the Collective IG or on my IG, Master Worlds, anything of those. And, or shoot me an email at buildthecollective@gmail.com. You can shoot that as well. It's in the comments. It's all over the place. Hit me up. We'll sort it out.
Yeah.
And then you know what we can do? As a group, as a collective, we can learn from each other. We can build off of each other, and we can grow together every day here on the Collective. See y'all tomorrow. GMO.